So, like I said, this week, it's week number 5 of doing these presentations with photojournalists who've been covering the war in Ukraine. I give you a warning, a little bit of a heads up. Some of the images you'll see tonight, and really all week, are going to be pretty graphic. So just hold on. And we have Timothy Fadick tomorrow, Mads Neeson on Wednesday, Wolfgang Schwang on Thursday, and Ken Sedino on Thursday, and Carol Guzzi on Friday. So it's a full lineup. And I recorded with Svet Jacqueline last week her presentation because she's in Ukraine and it's the middle of the night and sometimes the logistics don't work. So we thought it was best to record it. So again, I thank everyone for coming in, and we'll talk right after the presentation. So Jay, hit the button. Let's go. I want to thank everyone for coming in. And this is being pre-recorded because Svet is on location, and so next week she's not going to be able to do this live. So we're recording first. I do want to thank our sponsors, which is Photo Shelter, Epson Printers, Archive Magazine, American Photography, and Pro Photo Daily for always helping us out as we move along. This has been a very intriguing week with all of these incredible photojournalists coming in and speaking to us about the war in Ukraine. And tonight we have Svet Jacqueline, who is a Washington-based photographer, photojournalist, and we're thrilled, absolutely thrilled to have her present. So I can't thank you enough for coming in and doing this with us. So if you share your screen, we can get going.
Yes, we can. What just happened? All right. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. You're good. There you go.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Svet, and I arrived in Ukraine about a week after the war started. I was there for just under 4 months. I had never covered a conflict like this before, and I think a lot of journalists will talk about how unusual this was to witness, not just from a political and sort of war-based perspective, but also from being on the ground as a journalist and photographing this firsthand. So do I just talk about some of these pictures, or? Okay, so this first image was taken in Kyiv. It was before Bucha and Irpin were liberated. It was right at the height of the sort of fighting in that region, and you can see multiple explosions. We were on the top of a apartment building on the roof overlooking, and it was just strike after strike after strike just over the horizon line.
And did you go with somebody else, Svet, or you teamed up when you got there? How did that work for you?
Yes, I did initially just book a ticket and go by myself. And when I got there, there really was a community of journalists. So I ended up meeting up with Carol Guzzi, Alex Kent, Wolfgang Schwang, and he was with me when I took this photo. But I think that although we sort of sometimes decide to travel and stay together, it makes the most sense. I wouldn't suggest necessarily somebody like me who's so new to covering this, traveling this region alone. I always try to have at least somebody I knew working nearby that I could call on if things got very difficult and I needed help. The second photo is taken after this region in the far distance was liberated. It's in Irpin and Bucha. The scenes that journalists came upon was something between a genocide and a typhoon. I mean, there was very few structures left standing. There was so much, I don't know, debris and wreckage and life lost just lingering in the air and left on the streets. So I wanted to sort of show the inside outside of what a home looks like after it's been occupied by Russians.
And if you could just share a little bit of your own psyche, first time doing this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what does that feel like? I mean, or maybe it's too soon to be already in a reflecting moment, or but is it like, how do you control yourself around the emotions of, wow, I'm in a war zone?
Yeah. I mean, I think as journalists, we're always reflecting a little bit. I don't think it's ever too soon to really try to gain some perspective about your situation. So going into this, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous. I mean, I remember taking the train. It was a completely empty train at midnight. I was the only person on it going from Poland to Lviv, except for two other men that I ended up finding in a carriage all the way in the back. And I remember just thinking, what am I doing? This is a empty, free train into a place. Not a single person's on it except for me. So maybe I'm making a mistake. Maybe this is really dangerous and something that I shouldn't be exploring. But once I arrived and sort of saw the situation firsthand, and saw the potential to tell stories of these people in distress, it really left me in terms of any level of concern for my safety, and it really became concern for the issue that was happening in Ukraine. And I think that stayed with me throughout my entire time there. I just constantly stayed focused on what I could do to help. And for me, that was taking pictures and taking the best pictures that I could. Not really knowing how to navigate a war zone, I think had a lot of benefits, in a way, because I heard that this was unlike any other war zone. If we're talking about Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan, this seemed different. So to me, everything was different, and it allowed me to be at the same place as everyone else, I think, navigating this and learning very quickly what the best tactics to covering each situation are, and how to, make sure that you're not just staying safe, but you're staying well, you're staying focused. And I don't know, I think I could have easily decided it was too much and left, but for me, it really felt like a good fit. Like it was where I needed to be. And there wasn't a day that I didn't want to be there doing this work.
So it was a little bit learning as you go, and then realizing you're getting your traction and you can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very validating in that sense.
Right.
I am fully capable of being here and doing this. And then it just sort of became a, what do I want to say and how do I want to say it? That's outside of all the other people who are here also documenting this war.
So it's sort of it's an emancipation piece for you personally and career wise.
Yeah, I can't really say I had much of a career, before this. I'm relatively new to photojournalism, but I work with my heart. The things that I cover are very much in humanitarian issues. I'm very compassionate about the idea of being able to tell stories about these types of, historical events. So for me, there was no other option but to go and make sure that I could really do this and do it now.
Okay, great.
This is a portrait of Vladimir. He just lost his apartment to shelling overnight in the outskirts of Kyiv. He was in the next room with his brother. His mother was asleep in the bedroom, and she ended up passing away later from the shock of the blast. So we covered a lot of funerals. Pretty much since the moment I arrived in Ukraine, there were multiple funerals in multiple cities. I mean, it was constantly this sort of cyclical ritual of war that, it felt like the grief never stopped. And so this one particular burial was in Starchy. It's in a city that's about an hour outside of Lviv. It's a very small town, and every single person walked through the streets with the coffins and came to gather at the small cemetery that was there. And of all the funerals, I mean, this one touched me the most, just because you see this community of Ukraine that is really the backbone of the country. It has a huge sense of family, and I'd never seen a small town funeral like this before. So
Any idea what's in those black bags?
I don't actually know what is in those black bags. No.
Okay. You just wondering.
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember at the time when I was shooting this, I was very aware of how the members of the community were, seeing the press, because it was so intimate and it was so painful of a moment for them. And I think that when you're focused on, okay, how can I frame this photo, and what's a really strong photograph, but you're also psychologically aware of the fact that your presence is affecting people who are in such a vulnerable state, you sometimes miss some of the details. So next time maybe I can see what's in the bags, but I'm sorry, I don't know.
But that is such an incredible thing that you just said there. You are in this space that is so intimate, right? And how do you sort of blend without being intrusive, but showing the empathy? I mean, that's and as a new experience for you, that I mean this whole moment, is stirring for you, I can assume. To
Yeah.
find yourself there.
I mean, I think you learn that you cannot blend. You can't. I mean, but you also, the alternative is to not document. And I don't think that that's really an answer to this equation either. So it's really becoming at peace with the idea that you're standing there and you are affecting maybe one person or a few people, or the people who are really the most upset. But I found that in these moments, even even if it's painful to see someone like me there with a camera, there was a level of acceptance and understanding that what I was doing was sharing the story of the person they were grieving in a very real way. And I did feel that in general with most of these situations that I shot. There was an initial okay, you're here, and then there was a okay, you're here, this is okay. And sometimes there was even appreciation for the work. So this was completely new for me. Yeah. So I sequence these images more so in a visual sense, but it does sort of break up the timeline of my full trip to Ukraine. The way that I started my trip was I entered through Lviv. At the time, it was really the only city that you could leave or enter. And then I slowly just headed farther and farther east. So, then was Kyiv, then was Kharkiv, and then was the front lines. And again, we can talk about how unknown these experiences are to me, because they really were. And embedding with the military, even for an hour, is crazy. Embedding with them for a day, I mean, really understanding their day-to-day life and the sacrifices they're making in order to protect their land and their people is incredible. And so I don't have many photos because a lot of my time there was actually protecting myself from air rockets, and there was a lot of artillery, and it's very hard to shoot with active fire. I had no idea. So that was a lesson that I learned.
Okay, thank God.
This
Do you find your colleagues, I mean, I think I know the answer, speak a little bit about the camaraderie of of your colleagues, recognizing that this is a new space for you. How helpful were they?
Yeah, I think, well, on a very baseline level, having any other photojournalist, and there at times there were many other photojournalists, but having any other photojournalists is sort of like a reality check, where at the end of a really hard day, you look at somebody and they see they went through it too. And that, I think, is the most valuable rebuilding, is you don't really even have to say anything or provide instruction. It is just having someone there who understands. And then from a more maybe mentor perspective, I think there were a lot of I'm trying to figure out how to say this, because I don't really remember any point where there was like direct teaching. But I think that there is sort of a trust where they saw me as an equal. But I also think they saw that I was taking notes on the way that they were working, and, learning from their experiences, because this was a repeated experience for them in some ways, if not others. And I think that they were very open to that. So it was really just easy to work with people who I would assume would see me as a novice, but instead they really saw me as somebody who belonged there, and that helped me grow the most.
Oh, great.
So after Irpin and Bucha were liberated, there were so many volunteers that had survived the Russian occupation that then became sort of sweepers of these areas. They would go in, they would help pick up the bodies, but it wasn't just figuring out a way to collect those who had been deceased. It was making sure that they were identified, making sure that their injuries were cataloged for war crimes, and making sure that, if possible, they were buried in a meaningful way with their families. There were so many bodies that this became a challenge. I was in Bucha for 2 weeks, and every day was finding more and more people and transferring them to various locations so that they could be investigated and then buried. This family is a family of 4, a mother, a father, and 2 children who were tortured and burned and left in the middle of the town. And I think, as hard as it is to talk about death, this was a turning point for me in terms of my perspective on the war and war in general. If you think about the history of war and how it is a fight to protect, a fight to defend, there's always 2 sides. There's casualties on both sides. To me, this made this war feel like a genocide. It felt like every photo of World War II I had ever seen, and it made me upset. Not that everything didn't, but it was an unnecessary and cruel evil that was very public, which made an even farther statement. So many people went underground. This was to, a life-saving measure. This was in Kharkiv, in a neighborhood where houses were bombed every day, all day. There was maybe a few hours of relief. They would go outside, step upstairs, see the skylight, hear a noise, and go back downstairs. This mother and her son had been living in this bunker for 2 months when I went down with them. And it's probably about the size of a closet. This girl, her name is Victoria. She's also was living in a bunker for 2 months, also in a different region of Kharkiv. I actually spent some time with them in this bunker. I wanted to understand what sleeping in a bunker was like, living in a bunker was like, what their day-to-day life, had become since the war started. And yeah, it was another one of those very moving experiences, because you get to connect on a different level. You're not just shooting a person that's experiencing a moment, you're living with someone as they're experiencing their life. And I'm really, honored that her family felt comfortable enough to have me down there with them during this time.
Yeah, and how did you find the words, um the technique to get yourself, to be trusted, to be believed, that these families would let you in?
Well, I think if you look past the skepticism of me being a foreigner, of me having a camera, a lot of these people are living in pain and they really just want to be heard. I think that people underestimate how isolating war is to civilians who are experiencing it. It doesn't matter if you have 100 people around you, you feel alone because of how horrible it is to live through it day to day. And I don't think I do anything special. I think I just genuinely listen. I mean, I am very interested, and I want them to know that I'm here to tell their story. So I make sure they know that. And, the access they feel comfortable giving me after that is up to them. This family was very open and very interested in having me around to see what their life is like. And I think it's also nice to just have someone else in their space, because it had been so long since they'd had like a real social interaction with someone from the outside. I mean, it's
Sort of like a comfortable distraction.
exactly. But I mean, it was just as much a distraction for me. Me and Victoria, we like spent the night dancing to like music that she likes. And it was like American TikTok music, and I think that these situations really validate how closely connected we all are, even if our circumstances are so different.
Mm.
Um, this
And
was
are you keeping a diary, Svet? As you day, like each evening, do you write your notes? I mean, how do you do it to keep, for yourself?
yeah. I think next time I go back, I'm gonna make that more of a priority. I do
Mm.
always jot something down, whether it's on my phone or I do like an audio recording. Um, but I think really cataloging the experience is important. And I'm now doing that a bit on the back end, just through the notes that I've taken. And sometimes when I had an assignment, so much of my time at night was filing and transcribing, and you get a few hours of sleep and then you're up working again. So coming up with a system that allows you to also do that for your personal perspective, I think is really important.
And how are you making your family back in the States comfortable in that you're safe? You, you know, how, because I'm sure your parents are crazy. Like, where is she tonight? Where is she today?
Um, yeah, I think, you know, mm, I just
And
did
if,
the best I could,
okay,
you
yeah, and
know.
if it's too personal a question,
No, no, it's okay. I mean, in a way, you really have to become a second place thought. I mean, you don't really spend any time thinking about like how you're doing, not to say you're not thinking about how your family's doing, but it's so immersive, these experiences. And I think that for me, checking in at home was okay, I should do that now. But I was always more concerned about the people I was working with and the families that I was witnessing and checking in with them. And, I would always make sure after I did a story, a couple days, how are you doing? What's going on? I mean, and there's only so much communication you can have every day. So I did the best I could. And if I knew it was going to be a particularly dangerous day, I would just, send a I love you, email or text.
mm,
Um, Speaking of
wait,
family,
explain that shot, the prior shot.
this was taken in Bucha just after it had been liberated. All of these casings are from shelling. This whole town had been occupied by Russian soldiers. It was almost used sort of as a base camp, and it was left in just complete disarray. I mean, not just because was ammunition everywhere, but there was like vodka bottles everywhere and clothing, and they just destroyed it and left. And so this soldier was walking through a backyard and just checking to make sure that there wasn't any live ammunition anywhere. And I took this photo. Um, Again, I think that I always try to find personal moments in tragedy. So, when I would come into a house that had just been shelled, I always gravitated toward the emblems of the family. I looked for photo albums and things that sort of show the life that was maybe there beforehand. This photo was taken in Kharkiv. So after I got back from covering the front line, I needed a break. So I went to Poland to do an assignment for a couple days, and I thought maybe I was going to go back to the States, that I had had enough, but I couldn't leave. So I got back on a train, went back straight to Kharkiv, and they had just started opening up the city. They had decided that it had become safe enough, since they had pushed the line back on the outskirts. And so there had been hundreds of people living in the metro in central Kharkiv, and they were trying to evacuate them so that they could get the metro running again. But the day that they chose to do that, there was also a lot of shelling in the center of the city. So that is what this photo is. He had just left the bunker to get onto a bus to be transported. And right a block away, there had been a shelling.
So explain that, Svet. You need a break. You're thinking about going home, but you can't leave. How
Yeah.
how much how much time is that? Is that over 2 days, over a week? I mean, like, how does that work? And how do you fight the I don't know the word, fight the temptation to go home and fight the temptation I want to go back? And how do you recognize I need a break? A lot of questions in that.
No, that's okay. I think the I need a break came from some of the close calls that I had experienced. I definitely felt a change in my central nervous system that made me feel less safe in circumstances that had felt safe before. And for me, that was okay, like you need to take a break. And just being in Ukraine, you are in an unsafe airspace. There is no place that is safe, even if there are regions that are safer than other regions. Every square inch of the country is a potential target for an airstrike. And I would like to think that there's accuracy, but I know for a fact that there isn't. So even if they are only looking for military targets, those rockets are hitting so many civilian buildings in that intent, or maybe not, I think that they're just firing them. And so at a point I was like, I need to leave for, I thought it would be a couple days to just be in a safer airspace. So I took the train to Warsaw, and I'd gotten an assignment there. So I did that assignment, and I felt like I wasn't done yet. And I think a huge part of being a storyteller is listening to your intuition. And that's important when you're in an unsafe place. That's important when you're in a safe place. It's important when you're one-on-one with a subject. I mean, what do you feel you should do next? What do you feel is right? And I think people who are very good at this work listen to themselves and trust that voice. And so for me, I knew I had to go back.
So are you talking to anybody through the process, or is this all just, self-reflection at night? You're laying in bed, and how does it work for you to come to these conclusions?
Um, I remember having phone calls with Carol, for example, and just, going back and forth, but I feel that it is helpful to discuss maybe how you're feeling, but at the end of the day, it is your decision. Nobody can make it for you. And that was really the sentiment I got. If I called other journalists, it allowed me a cleaner headspace to think, but the decision was mine all the time. So it is, you're up at night, just what do you want to do? How are you going to feel? Why do you want to do this? And for me, it just felt like the work was not done. And that I couldn't leave until I at least felt like I had, covered this in a just way from my perspective. And there wasn't a specific scenario that I felt like I was missing or anything like that. It just felt unfinished. And I knew that would keep me up ultimately for way more nights if I walked away from it.
But yeah, that's a thorough thought process, right? I mean, I guess these experiences that you had are sort of the foundations moving forward in your career, right?
Yeah, and having never been in a war zone, having never left a war zone, all these things are now sort of opportunities that I realized that you can go, you can leave, you can come back, you can leave, you can come back. I didn't know any of these things. I didn't know how it would feel. I didn't know what agency I had, what the safety measures would look like. And so it was important that I took those training wheels off in all of those ways in this scenario. So that also helped influence me going back. I needed to know that I could go back and how it would feel when I go back, and, what that would look like after having a traumatic experience, whether it was something I could mentally overcome and continue working. And if not, what would I need to do to then be able to go back later on? So it was imperative that I go and make sure that I at least try to complete the work. And if it wasn't possible, then, I would go back later. So this was another liberated town. We're seeing in the news now that more towns are becoming liberated as this war continues. And I think, although there are a lot of hopes that people evacuate and have bunkers for safety, there are circumstances where that's just not the case. And in a lot of these small towns, even after they've been occupied, there's sort of a false sense of safety. So even though there might be Russian tanks on the street and sort of a Russian sense of policing, they're still in theory supposed to be allowed to leave their house or go to their gardens or, go to the grocery store and get milk. And in a lot of these cases, they never came back. So this is, just a field, and this person, left a home in this neighborhood, walked out into the field, and I think, that is a very sad reality of what's happening in Ukraine. Another story that's similar to this is this woman, her husband, again, just walked outside of his house. They heard gunshots a few minutes later, and then his brother went to go check on him, and they heard gunshots a few minutes later. They were able to negotiate with a soldier to recover one of the bodies, and they brought it back to their home and buried it in the backyard. But because there is such a heavy investigation for war crimes, they were asked if they were willing to excavate the body and allow them to investigate it for those war crimes. And she and her son agreed. And so they are getting interviewed in the background as they wheel the body to the morgue. This was at a nursing home in Bucha. There were 8 bodies found in the pool house, 3 bodies found outside, and 3 bodies found inside the nursing home. It's possible that it was, a similar execution style death, but it is also possible it was just neglect.
Is it surprising to you, as you go through like these last 2 or 3 slides, how organized war is, with people coming in, documenting war crimes, just figuring things out and reporting it and writing it down, like that part of it? Did you imagine it being more chaotic? Did this surprise you at all?
I mean, I think there are moments of chaos, of course. You think of an initial blast and nobody knows it's coming, nobody knows what to do. That chaos exists, but I think we underestimate our ability as humans to sort of kick into gear. And we see it in time and time again where we accomplish things that we're not capable of, we didn't think we were capable of. And I think in these circumstances, it's not even a second thought to, put on your shoes and fill a role to help in any way possible and figure out how to hold those accountable, how to move forward. And so I don't know if I was necessarily that surprised, because, I would do the same thing if I wasn't a journalist, if it was my city and, they needed help. So in a way, it makes sense. I think, there's definitely an organization there that's beyond just humanitarian, need to help, but I think there has to be. So
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question. I mean,
Yeah, no, it's all, with everything you're showing, and then, these guys show up and they're documenting his name and how he was killed and where he was killed. All of that sort of organizational, logistical, important, crucially important information is documented, and that's great. It just for me, there's like this place where, how does that really happen? These people show up and they document it, and thank God that they are doing that.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, if these guys were farmers before or police officers before, I mean, nobody has done this before, and
Right.
they're handed a clipboard and get as much information as possible. If it isn't something that they've been trained to do, you figure out how to do it. And of course I understand that. I mean, that was my reality as well.
Yeah.
This was at the mass grave in Bucha. They excavated 150 something bodies. And family members would come every day and sort of hope that they could maybe see their loved ones that have been missing since the beginning of the war. But it's also just a very upsetting sight. I mean, it's very hard to describe what it must be like to, you know, be missing a loved one and have to see this, even if the person you're looking for isn't there.
Yeah.
And of course, it was not just civilian casualties. There are a lot of casualties of military, and this was a Ukrainian soldier who was found outside his home after the occupation. This was in Ostomel Air Force Base. There was a very heavy battle there. V signifies that the Russians had been there. It's their insignia. They put it on everything. And I just remember like walking through, it was just every plane was destroyed, every vehicle was destroyed, bullet holes everywhere. And then the sun started setting. So, you know, I took this photo, and I think when I, you know, try to bookend a story about war, I always think of this image. Is that all of them? And just to end it on a, you know, a bit of a better note, because you know, in these horrible things that are happening, there are a lot of people who are still trying to, you know, live life and show moments of kindness. And this girl had lost her father at war. They were about to meet with Zelensky. He was coming to do an address at the building just to the left. And so they were having some children meet him, sort of to, you know, lift the spirits and sort of, I don't know, again, start a healing process. So these other soldiers were just accompanying this young girl, and it was very sweet. And the last image is another young girl. When I was in Ukraine, I was approached about a project, working on a book with some other female photojournalists. And it actually comes out next month, October 14th. And my portion in this book, which is called Relentless Courage, Ukraine at War, is called, you know, Children at War. It really focuses on the childhood experience in a war zone, which a lot of my work does focus on. And so this last image is a girl as she is boarding a train out of Ukraine. There are still so many people being evacuated. There are a lot of people trying to go back home. But I do feel a very personal place for people who are displaced from their homes at a young age, and the trauma that that will cause for the rest of their lifetime. I think that this war, you know, sits like a badge on them. And it will be very hard to heal this young generation from this trauma. And I hope that my work, you know, sort of helps with that initiative and shows people that, you know, children are the most affected in these scenarios.
Yeah, the work is so incredibly powerful. So let me ask you this: how does this experience, and I do want to know more about the book, and maybe we can you can get me information, and when we have the presentation live, we can be promoting it. But how does this experience? Yeah, how does this experience change you? So it's to that, and I want to ask you, as you look back from a safety standpoint, or just an experience standpoint, what mistakes did you make that you look back, I shouldn't have done that,
Yeah,
or that was really good. I'm glad I did that.
sure. Okay, so I think I'll start with the mistakes and then go with, sort of the evolution that it provided for me. What mistakes? I think if I look at things I wish I'd done differently, it comes down to like preparational things as a journalist. I didn't bring enough cash. I both my hard drives ended up failing while I was there. My computer broke when I was there. You have to expect the worst of every scenario and prepare and be able to fix anything that goes wrong. And I think I did not have a lot of foresight in that because, I was also learning everything else at the same time. And I really encourage young journalists who want to go cover these things not to just hop on a plane and go. It's not useful to do that because things will go wrong, things can go wrong, and always making sure that you have backups for backups and are really equipped to handle a war zone. And for the most part, I mean, I really I was able to get the help that I needed and get everything back in order, but I would definitely bring more cash.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that's a small thing, but
No, it's significant because it helps everything else down the road.
absolutely. And specifically when it comes to paying fixers, who, if, maybe people don't know what a fixer is, but it's sort of like the producer of the day. They go and they drive you, they translate, they source out stories if you need. They're really these like unsung heroes of journalism, for foreign journalists. And of course, we pay them for their time, but sometimes they would have PayPal or something. But for me, it would just be nice to be able to give them exactly what they are owed for their hard work and their sacrifice in cash every time. And so I will make sure I have much more cash next time.
Okay, good.
And
And how did it change you?
yeah, how did it change me? Um,
And maybe it didn't. Mm.
no. And when you talk about mistakes, like there are always moments you're gonna miss. I try not to lose sleep on like a single photograph. You're constantly learning. So even if you've been doing it for 20 years, you're gonna miss something and be like, oh, I wish I could have been there, stood there, or stayed longer, or waited for this light, and those to me could tear you apart. I try to just take them as learning experiences and know that, next time I'll do it differently. Um, and that I think also helps. I don't know, like how did it change me? I mean, it made me such a better photojournalist. At the end of the day, like I am a different person because I've been part of this. But I'm also a much better storyteller because of this. And I really look forward to going back.
And when will you go back?
I'm right now I'm thinking the end of October. Um, that's sort of my next like availability in my schedule. And I'm interested to see. It's gonna look and feel
And
very different, I think.
yeah, you could stop sharing, Svet, if
Oh,
that's,
thank you so much. So it will just be me.
yeah, me and you
Oh, okay, cool.
now.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. Totally fine. It's yeah. So you go back in October, and will it be more of an open-ended ticket coming home? Well, how do you think you'll do it this time?
Well, I think I will never book a return ticket, unless it's required to any future assignment because it is so hard to predict. I probably changed my flight back to the US 5 times while I was in Ukraine. So I think, sometimes you need to book some things to just because of travel requirements, but my intention in terms of going back is to maybe tell a less general story and find a single subject or community and stay with them for a longer extended period of time and sort of tell a bigger story of war in a very intimate setting. So I don't know how long that's going to take. And I, again, as you know, won't leave until I feel it's really been done. So that could take a while.
So tell us more about this book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called Relentless Courage, Ukraine and the World at War. It's produced by Blue Star Press. It's 5 female photojournalist portfolios and then singles from a ton of other journalists covering the war, a lot of whom I'm sure you've interviewed. And it is sort of this collective of like sort of the first like 100 days of the war in Ukraine. It stands as a testament to what has happened there and, sort of how it unraveled from the beginning.
All women?
No, the portfolios are, it's Carol Guzzi, Paula Bronstein, myself, Yesna Menkovitz, and Lindsay Adario. And then it's a collective of single images from journalists who were on the ground, some great journalists.
Okay, great. So as what I like to do is always give the journalist the last word. So sign us off with any words of wisdom that you have, or anything you'd like to let the general public know about this conflict and about yourself. And needless to say, I cannot thank you enough for coming in and doing this. And when you come back, we'd love to have you on again. And when the book is being published, you're invited to tell us more about the book as well.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I feel so
Standing
fortunate.
invitation.
Yeah, no, I feel really fortunate to both be involved in this project, but I mean, also to you and what you're doing here, which is keeping the conversation alive and well. If I have any last words, it's to encourage people to continue to pay attention to what's happening there, and to understand that no matter how it may seem, Ukraine is a battleground for all of us, and they're defending freedom and democracy that we take for granted every day. So please stay involved and try to help in any way that you can, and hopefully I can do the same.
Great. So again, Svet, I thank you very much. Like I say, you have a standing invitation with us.
Thank you.
Most importantly, be safe. Call your parents all the time.
Yes,
And we appreciate all that you're doing, and your colleagues as well. So
thank
be
you.
safe, and always let us know what you're doing.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah, me and you know.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. It's yeah. So you go back in October, and will it be more of an open-ended ticket coming home? Well, how do you think you'll do it this time?
Well, I think I will never book a return ticket unless it's required to any future assignment, because it is so hard to predict. I probably changed my flight back to the US 5 times while I was in Ukraine. So I think, sometimes you need to book some things to just because of travel requirements, but my intention in terms of going back is to maybe tell a less general story and find a single subject or community and stay with them for a longer extended period of time and sort of tell a bigger story of war in a very intimate setting. So I don't know how long that's going to take. And I, again, as you know, won't leave until I feel it's really been done. So that could take a while.
So tell us more about this book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called Relentless Courage, Ukraine and the World at War. It's produced by Blue Star Press. It's 5 female photojournalist portfolios, and then singles from a ton of other journalists covering the war, a lot of whom I'm sure you've interviewed. And it is sort of this collective of like sort of the first like 100 days of the war in Ukraine. It stands as a testament to what has happened there, and sort of how it unraveled from the beginning. And
All women?
No, the portfolios are it's Carol Guzzi, Paula Bronstein, myself, Yesna Menkovitz, and Lindsay Adario. And then it's a collective of single images from journalists who were on the ground, some great journalists.
Okay, great. So as what I like to do is always give the journalists the last word. So sign us off with any words of wisdom that you have, or anything you'd like to let the general public know about this conflict and about yourself. And needless to say, I cannot thank you enough for coming in and doing this. And when you come back, we'd love to have you on again. And when the book is being published, you're invited to tell us more about the book as well.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I feel so
Standing
fortunate.
invitation.
Yeah, no, I feel really fortunate to both be involved in this project, but I mean also to you and what you're doing here, which is keeping the conversation alive and well. If I have any last words, it's to encourage people to continue to pay attention to what's happening there, and to understand that no matter how it may seem, Ukraine is a battleground for all of us, and they're defending freedom and democracy that we take for granted every day. So please stay involved and try to help in any way that you can, and hopefully I can do the same.
Great. So again, Svet, I thank you very much. Like I said, you have a standing invitation with us.
Thank you.
Most importantly, be safe. Call your parents all the time.
Yes,
And we appreciate all that you're doing, and your colleagues as well. So
thank
be
you.
safe, and always let us know what you're doing.
I will. Thank you.
So that is Svet. If anyone has any comments, I mean, it's interesting hearing me ask her, different questions over time. Now, I mean, she sounded like she's been doing it for decades. So poised and in control, and I can't thank her enough for doing that. And we'll find out more information about this book, Relentless Courage, over the course of the week, and we'll drop the website and where we can get the book if anyone's interested in getting the book. So Jay, you can open up anyone's mic if anyone has any comments. But that was a great body of work. She really did a terrific job. And yeah, Howard, we'll try to arrange some type of a book signing, and get more information so that can get into people's hands.
Great. As tragic as the situation is, there was an intimacy in her photography that was just astonishing to me. The very, very last photo of the gal on the train, and you only got part of the face of what I assume was a parent or some adult. The facial expressions, the lighting, the fact she chose to do everything in black and white. Uh, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's if she's new, quote unquote new,
Yeah,
her photographic skills, her journalistic eye, her comments about what she would do when she goes back, about finding a story. It's like the whole is the sum of the parts kind of thing. That you could see the entire war through the eyes of one or two individuals and still tell the whole story kind of thing. It's just astonishing.
yeah. And it seemed like she was learning as she was going, but you can see that the help of the conversation with the other journalists, like they take in, they take them in as one of their own. And I think when they recognize that somebody is dedicated, somebody is interested, somebody wants to learn, they really embrace them, as an equal, right, right away.
Yeah, I mean, to be in a war zone like this one, and maybe they're all the same, but this one seems, at least in my mind and my life's history, or my life experience, that the bombing is so indiscriminate that there is no safe place, and to live in a world where there is no safety and yet still be a productive journalist is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's
To find the
yeah,
courage,
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, we can only imagine what that feels like, to be doing this kind of work. And if anyone else has any other comments, jump in. Just
I love the story. I love the story she was sharing about dancing with the girl where she stayed, and the comment she made about how, like, being there seems like such a different world, but then at times, like, there are just things that you connect on universally, like doing dances that are, that everybody knows, to songs that everybody knows, right? I thought that was really interesting, because I can't even imagine being in her situation, but then having such a common ground, such a playful common ground is, I don't know, gives me goosebumps.
Well, that's really the crazy thing about war. While there's a war going on, people are still people, kids are still kids.
Right.
Kids want to dance, kids want lollipops and ice cream and to play outside and all of that. It's the normalcy of life, which I think Robert has mentioned something about. We're in a war, and all these other things in the 21st is still going on. I need to charge my phone, right? And that kid needs to dance. It's and living in those bunkers and shelters, and the day in and day out of that, it has to happen. It has to go on.
Yeah, and then her comment about, how this younger generation is going to, the impact the war will have on their future, them being so little now, and the trauma that causes. I hadn't thought of it that way. It's interesting.
And you'll see over the course of the week, with especially with Tim tomorrow, we'll discuss the trauma that the photographers go through, how they have to decompress when they come home. Because you imagine you're in a war zone like that, and then in 15 hours you're walking along Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, right?
Right.
How does your brain take that? And you're seeing all this brutality, and then somebody just bumps you on the street. Like how do you play back and forth in those emotions, especially with, like I say, in a plane ride. I mean, and if you live in France or Germany, it's a 2-hour ride and you're back home.
There must be like a PTSD, or
That's what I was gonna
right?
say.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like something like that, to a lesser extent. Or maybe to the same extent, I don't know, but something like that. It's not right.
Yeah, and the journalists, they speak to each other, like they know when it's time for you to go, and they'll tell you you're taking too many risks. That means it's time to get out and then come back, because you're there, you're too comfortable, and now you're putting yourself in danger, and maybe your fixer in danger, your colleagues. So everyone sort of monitors each other in that space, but you're like she said, you're really alone, and there's really no place that's safe. Which is an intriguing place to find yourself, especially as I never asked her age, but she certainly was more seasoned than she spoke. I mean, but certainly this experience, gave her years of experience, in one moment.
Frank, it's Anya. I was just going to say the PTSD is something that needs to be taken into consideration, obviously for journalists. Our daughter works for an organization that, she's day to day tracking, reading articles, and they're actually offering their research analysts therapy on a regular basis, because it's difficult to be reading about this, seeing about this on a day-to-day basis, and then just pretending that you can go on with life outside of the office on a regular basis. And even as a short anecdotal story, this summer, we were fortunate to have some of the refugee children participate in the scout camps that we had here. And, things you need to take into consideration when they were doing a fire drill at the camp, they needed to warn the children from Ukraine that this was just a fire drill and an exercise. And when the whistle started blowing, that they didn't need to start panicking, because, these kids have just gone through such terrible trauma, but you just forget about it because they're playing with all the regular children until an alarm goes off.
Right.
So-
And you could say that about children, in all these wars,
Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
Syria, Afghan, and what is the collateral damage to those kids?
Right. It's not just physical, it's the emotional is terrible. Yeah.
But then outside of the PTSD of it all, there's also, I'm sure, this frustration because people like Katria, for example, who are so involved in what's going on and whose life work is to read about this and to talk about it, right? There must be this whole other piece of frustration when you see the rest of the world kind of continue and we stop talking about it and we stop having conversations like this. And I know there must be this frustration, like why isn't everybody focused on this the way that others are, right? So I'm sure that must be all connected.
You're absolutely right.
That's a big deal. That's why you got to keep on doing these things so that it doesn't stop. And we all tell our friends and our colleagues, you should, what are you thinking about it? What are you doing about it? Is there something you can do? There's also something that I think Ron Haviv was one of the people that started, another journalist who recognized that the photojournalists haven't had enough training on the medical side where they can help. So someone gets really hurt badly, there's got to be a way to help them get to a hospital and maybe save their lives. So there's like a whole first aid course that they really want you to take, so that like say someone like Svet who's young and she's in a situation where if a journalist gets hurt, there's a way, because there's what's his name, Chris Hondros was a photojournalist who died in Iraq, and there was always a thinking that had the people he was with been trained, they may have been able to save his life. He was bleeding out and they didn't know what to do. And maybe just by putting a fist onto his heart could have saved him. You don't know that for sure, but the idea is, everyone has to be trained for all these different things when these journalists go into these zones. It's complex on many levels.
When she was talking about how, people would come with their clipboards and try to take as much information as they could, and they didn't know exactly like what to do or how to act in these situations. I obviously to a way, or I don't know what extent, but it reminded me of COVID a lot, in that like it was something that we were all trying to figure out in the moment when COVID first happened, when we were trying to figure it all out and nobody kind of knew what to do or how to act or what the right next move was. It made me think of that, because it's like this helpless, I don't know what to do, I don't know what my next move is feeling.
There's a whole place, that we can only imagine what it's really like, in these war zones. Thank goodness, but we just have to keep on talking about it and trying to move the dial and keep on supporting, these the Ukrainian nation, and we are, and we will. If you listen to our political leaders, and we're committed. Mr. Tomko, Brian, anything?
Yeah, great stuff. You have to turn off over there. We're in the same room.
Okay.
No, amazing. You have to turn off. You have to turn off your speaker. I can't talk.
It's the story of your life.
One thing I would say is there's a course, and we can send the link. This Timothy Snyder course. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he wrote a book called Bloodlands, and he's teaching a course this semester in Yale about Ukraine, and it's incredibly interesting. If you're watching this, I think you might be interested as well to hear his perspective. He's an American who I think speaks Polish. He was over in Ukraine. So I think they've dropped the third or fourth session, but it's a Yale course. It's his class. He talks about history, talks about Putin and his quote treatise. It really is a great course. And Frank, I'll send you the link over.
Yeah, we'll put it in tomorrow.
Yeah, because the sessions are like 45 minutes, and it's really amazing. And he was over in Ukraine, I'd say 2 weeks ago. They had a conference in Kyiv, I think it was, and he was there and back, in kind of 48 hours. But he's connected to the government there. Like he knows everyone over there. Anyway, he has a really interesting perspective on history.
Great. Well, yeah, send us that link. So I want to thank everyone for coming in, and we're going to be doing this all week at 7 o'clock. Same Zoom link. I encourage you to tell your friends, your colleagues, to jump on. Tomorrow we have Tim Fadek, who's really, highly acclaimed photojournalist, who I'm guarantee there'll be some really powerful work as for the whole week. So thanks everybody. And Mary, do you want to close us out, Mary? Where are you? Mary's gone. Okay. Well, Mary's gone. So we'll see everyone over the course of the week.
Oh, there she is.
There's Mary.
But you guys are muted.
Is this the first time you guys have worked on it with a computer?
Okay, try again.
Can we try again?
Yeah, there you go, Mary. Now we can hear you.
I just had to run over to Brian's computer because obviously they can't share the same computer for whatever reason. I don't know. But in any case, I want to thank you for doing this. Each session is just incredible. By the way, as you know, I'm Ukrainian, and so this is very personal to me. And just to go back to what Emilia was talking about and Anya were talking about, Katria, who does this research on a daily basis, sometimes looking at it for 8 to 10 hours a day. I was speaking with her yesterday. She said, the problem for me is it's not that I'm cold and terribly objective when I'm talking about other wars and other conflicts, she said, but this is especially painful because it's personal. We have family there. We have family fighting, soldiers fighting in there. As a matter of fact, every day around 5 o'clock, I asked my relative to send me a text, just send me a heart, and I know you're okay. Imagine living under those circumstances. And sometimes when I'm talking with them, all of a sudden they'll say, oh, the air raid siren is going off. And I'm saying, okay, so stop the conversation, go to the basement. No, we just sit in the door frame, that'll protect us. We're getting so tired of this. We have to keep living anyway. So thank you so much for doing this. Tonight's session was wonderful. We look forward to the rest of the week.
Great. Thank you, Mary. So
Thanks.
we will see everyone over the course of the week. And thanks very much for coming in. And